thank you. How's everybody tonight? Everybody good? Yeah. You ready to get going? Yeah. I'm an advertising commercial photographer, and like I said, we're not talking about the years because it's been a long time. I specialize in big production, location, people, architecture, drone, and animals. Believe it or not, I actually have a zoology degree from Georgia, but I also have a photography degree from Sam Houston State in Texas. And I started off in the business as an assistant, just like my student, she's actually a student of mine at the Art Institute, and worked my way up the ladder. So it's a long journey sometimes, but it's a fun journey, and I wouldn't trade what I do for anything. Who all here has a camera? I know you do. I know you do. Yeah. DSLR or iPhone? Like a real camera or an iPhone? Yeah. A real one, okay. Not that iPhone's not real, because it takes really good pictures these days, right? So how many people own their own lighting? Okay, what kind of lights do y'all have?
White lightning.
Mostly bulb buffs.
White lighting, bulb buff, yes.
I have a strobe.
A strobe, like a on-camera flash or
No, alien bees.
alien beast, okay. What about you guys?
Just bulbs in a stand.
So just a regular, like a fluorescent bulb,
Very basic.
okay. Does someone over here have one? LED, okay. So LEDs are kind of the, I guess I could turn some light on so you can see me. How's that? Say, just turn it down, that's okay. Y'all can still see it.
Yeah.
So LEDs are like the new thing. I prefer using strobes, especially when I'm shooting with people. And the reason being is it stops motion, okay? So when this is an LED that's shining right here. So if we're shooting with an LED, we have to be concerned about how fast our shutter speed is, so that when the person moves, there's not like these little blurbs, right? So that's why I tend to want to tell you guys that use strobes for the stuff that you're doing. But the LEDs and the other lights are so much cheaper, and you can still get the same results. You don't have to buy a $800 strobe to make it work, okay? So let's talk about some stuff here. So there are 10 lighting facts, lighting basics. The larger the light source, the softer the light, okay? So if I have a big, huge shower curtain or a piece of diffusion, that's gonna make a much bigger light source, right? So that's gonna make the light softer. The closer the light is to the subject, the softer the light is also, okay? If it's like right here on me, it's gonna be softer because it's wrapping around me, okay? Diffusion scatters light, essentially making the light source broader and therefore softer. So if we put the light behind this diffusion, that's gonna soften it as well. Bounce light acts as a diffusion. If we bounced our lights up into the ceiling and we just needed the room to have a little fill in the room, so it's not so dark, we could bounce it off the ceiling and it would just make a nice flat fill in the room, okay? Or we could bounce it off the side wall as well. You just have to pay attention on what color it is, right? If it's a green wall, it's gonna cast green back, okay? Light falls off and can be used to vary relationships between the light on your subject and your background. So if I'm right up next to this background, the light is going to light the background, right? If I move away from the background, then the light's going to fall off quite drastically on the background, so it's going to be darker. So if you need a darker background, move your subject away from it so that you're able to have a little depth and dimension. Front lighting de-emphasizes texture. Lighting from the side, above, below, or actually even behind creates texture. So if you're wanting someone's hair to show up, or you're wanting to have like a grimy, tough dude show up all his beard and his pores and everything, you might want to do some side lighting on him to bring some of that stuff up. Okay. Shadows create volume. So here we kind of get to the painter side of you guys. Got to have shadows to make it look like there's something there. We got to have highlights to also emphasize that, right? Because the first thing that our eye goes to is a highlight in an image or a painting. That's where your eye jumps at. Backlight can be used as a highly diffused light. Probably you guys won't probably get into much of that, but it is one of the facts. Light has color even when it looks like it's white. Okay. I think we all, because our eyes compensate, we always think, oh, well, that's white. And it's like, well, if you took it in and put your little dropper in Photoshop, you'd go, that is not white. Okay. Everybody would think that light up is white, but it's not. That's a warm fluorescent. Can everybody see that it's warm? Okay. Can you see the one over here is not as warm, it's more green? Okay. Can you see that this is a little bit more blue? So every light's got its own kind of little color, even though it's supposedly a light. Fluorescents have messed us up lately because they come in all different kinds of colors. We can get them to look like our old style tungsten lights that we're used to. We can get them to match regular fluorescent, which has a green cast to it. We can get the warm white, which has a little more magenta in it. We can get them daylight balanced, and we can get them completely neutral. So that gives you a whole lot of different options, right? But it also causes trouble. So if you're lighting something, like say we were lighting something in this room, and I didn't have this light on at all, it's not really pretty light, is it? And if we took a picture with my camera at a daylight setting, it would look very green or cyan. And so we've got to do something besides what's in our rooms. We've got to create a little bit of ambiance so that you have what you need to draw from, or for me to document when I'm photographing. Yes, sure. Go ahead.
So, you know, the cameras now have the phone cameras as well as the camera cameras. They have options of what type of coloring to set it on.
Absolutely.
So when you have a particular type of temperature or Kelvin of light,
Look at there, you're using Kelvin. Look at you.
If you don't get the right setting on your camera, it doesn't shoot it the right way.
No, it does not.
So
And
how do
so-
you work that out?
So the cameras, and it depends on your camera to how the settings are set up. But like my camera, I can go in and set it to a specific Kelvin degree, which as a photographer, I kind of know 3200s of tungsten, 55 to 56 is daylight. These kinds of fluorescents are kind of like in the 4200 area. But for the average person, you would just want to go into the white balance section and select either daylight, tungsten. There is a fluorescent one. The long skinny thing is fluorescent. There's shade. So if you're in shade, it actually puts a little bit of warmth into the file. Okay, because in shade, it's blue, right?
So do you try to match that?
You try to match it with what your main light is. Yeah, you try to match it with what it is. And you can do a custom white balance, which means if you have a gray card and you shoot real close up and do a setting in there, and you can set it to neutral, to the light that you're shooting. A lot of people, but that gets over people's heads, so a lot of times I don't mention that too much, but it is something that can be very beneficial. And as painters, you know, you guys are sensitive to colors, right? I mean, that's an important thing. So what I would say is start looking at the light in a different way than you're looking at it when you're photographing. Because I think, we pull our camera, our phone up and snap it and off we go. We don't think because it's on auto and it's easy, right? But if you're using your regular camera, start paying attention to those settings more often, you'll get a lot better pictures instantly, right? So, does everybody kind of know what shutter speed and f-stop and ISO is? Everybody kind of understands that, sort of, if I need to talk about it in a minute. Okay. So shutter speed is the time that it takes from the shutter, from the minute you press the camera button, that the shutter opens and closes, okay? If you have a fast shutter speed, which is anything really above, a faster would be 1/25th, okay, and above. And they go, these days they go up to 8 thousandths of a second. And some even higher. So that stops motion. That's what you'd want to have it set at if you're using a constant light. And I'm going to get into constant light flashes in a minute. But that's the time it opens and the time it closes and how fast it is. If you have it set like at a second, because you got, it's really dark in the room or whatever, that person is going to be no one sits still. But and you don't want that when you have a reference photo because that doesn't help you. So make sure you've got a high enough shutter speed. The f-stop is the opening on the lens. So how tight it is and how wide it is. So the smaller the opening is, the more in focus from this point to say that background is going to be in focus. The wider the f-stop is, which is the smaller number, like 1.4, 2.8, the depth of field is going to be very shallow. So it would be like from only here to here. Okay. So if you're photographing a person, you got to be really good with your focus if you're doing a wide open aperture. Because their nose might be in focus, but that's what you focus on, and their eyes would be out. Always focus on someone's eyes. Don't ever focus on their nose, but always focus on, because that's what everybody wants to see. That's what you want in focus. People don't care if the tip of the nose is out of focus, but they sure care if the eyes are out of focus. Okay. All right, ISO is the sensitivity of the chip. So I would say, unless you have a professional high-end camera, I would stay under 400 ISO. Unless you have a really great camera. Because the higher the ISO, the more noise and grain you're going to get in your images. Okay. So that means your reference photo is not going to be that great. You're going to have all this graininess and you're just going to go, oh, I'm getting into pointillization type stuff. So there's nothing wrong with depth of field being shallow. I think it can be really cool and interesting. And a lot of painters paint that way, right? The person will be nice and focused, and then the surrounding areas might be out of focus. Okay. Just know that when you're shooting wide open, that you may not carry focus from the tip of the nose to the back of the head. Okay. So, yes, ma'am.
So when you have a zoom lens,
Yes,
like
ma'am.
300 at zoom, and you zoom up and you get your focus on the eye, and you zoom back out, does it hold that focus?
There's a problem with that because the elements of the lens, it's moving the glass inside if it's a zoom. Okay, if it's not a zoom, then you can just zoom in from the back.
But if it's a zoom.
But if it's a zoom, it will
So you have
affect
to
it.
put it where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And then focus.
Yeah, but you can zoom in from the back on the back of your screen. I'm sure your camera has that. So that's how I would do it. I would zoom it in on that, right? Because this is a zoom. So if I'm zooming it in and out, there's an element in here that's moving back and forth, and that's going to change the focus. Okay. So yeah, definitely that could really give you a lot of havoc. So if it's a wider lens, like a 24 to 70, you might could get by with that a little bit, but a longer zoom, no, absolutely. All right, so does that kind of clear it up what shutter speed, f-stop, ISO is. That's our exposure triangle that you kind of got to have that down so that when we talk about some of this other stuff, you get it. All right, light is judged in 4 categories. I know you guys have had another photographer talk before, and I know he had this in his PDF, but I still want to kind of go over it again because it's important. Intensity and quantity is the total amount of light output, how powerful the light is, etc. The intensity of the light falling upon an object determines the brightness level, and that brightness level enables the capture medium, whether it's film or digital, to transform into a 3-dimensional space into a 2-dimensional rendering. Okay, you know, it's all about is it too dark? Is it too bright? Am I wanting that mood of it being dark and mysterious, or light and bright? Quantity, how do I say quality? Don't know why I do that. Soft or hard, diffused or specular. The quality of the light in a scene or photograph is determined by the source type, its size, its distance from the object being illuminated. For me, that's one of the most important parts of lighting, is whether I want it to be hard or I want it to be soft. Okay. And depending on when I'm photographing, it could totally change the mood of it, right? It could totally make it have a whole different feel if I've got hard shadows, or then I have an advertising type shot that's all bright and happy. So we're going to kind of go over the quality tonight a lot. So direction is another important thing. Where the front light, back light, side light, origination of the light, where it creates highlights and casts shadows. The direction is defined by the angle at which the light strikes the object within a scene or photograph, and it is again best identified by the observing shadows and any physical reflection of the source. So if my light is from the side, that's going to show a lot of texture. I'm going to have half something's in the light and other half's not in the light. If I move it around, I'm going to have something that's more like a Rembrandt light, which as painters, y'all all know about Rembrandt, that little triangle that it creates. If I move it straight in front, it's more of a beauty light, okay, because it's filling in all the shadows, right? Yeah, it makes us look like we're 20 years younger, which everybody likes. I think that's also why it's a trend lately to not have so many shadows. It's because everybody looks good in it. So direction and quality, I think, are really important because that determines how much shadow we've got, where the shadows are, and what the mood's going to be. Color is also important, but for me, it's a technical thing unless I'm really, really trying to do something cool and different. Okay. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen, I didn't show any of this stuff, but there's a style of light where it's all these different color gels on the people. I'm trying to think what movie had that in it. West Side Story had a little bit of that going on in it, right? I don't know if anybody's seen that. So it's a style for me. You know, it's a different style for me. I want my colors to be accurate. I might throw a little bit of warming in if I want something to feel like, oh, cute and sweet. Or I might put a little blue in it if I wanted to feel kind of ominous and, you know, edgier. But color is one of those things that kind of comes in and out pretty, you know, quickly. Okay, a typical lighting setup. A main light also is called a key light in the film industry. Most of the time I say main, I think. Don't I say main in class? I think, yeah. I don't know, I swap them all the time. So you have one light that's creating the main source, okay? So this whole setup here is just to show you a bunch of different lights. but this would be my main light, okay? Your main light's usually, from here to here, okay? Main light's never, hardly ever from the back, okay? So it's always up front. The main light is the strongest light, so it's gonna be the brightest light that you're using. It's usually set up at a 45-degree angle from the camera. That's just the standard rule because of the Rembrandt lighting, because that's what everybody wants to, in their mind as a standard. Color or mode, black and white photos. You'll want to set that on your camera. Persistence of shadows, which play an important role in creating an impression of dimension. So that's where we have to decide where our main light's going to be, what kind of mood we're wanting it. That's where, for me, the 45-degree angle is where everybody starts, but a lot of times people move it around, right? Shape and size of the bright surfaces. So the main light is going to cause the highlights, right? So wherever the highlights are, that's going to help create shape in the face. Okay, just like shadows create shape, the highlight creates shape, and the catch lights in the eyes make people look like they're alive. Okay, that they don't have that dead eye look. Contrast in the shadows. Wherever the main light is going to determine all that. So you can either have really deep dark shadows, or you can have shadows that have been filled in, which we're going to talk about a fill light, and then that kind of softens it a little bit. Okay. The right exposure is defined according to the main light. So if I was to take a meter reading of what I want to set my camera at, I would want, let's say I want to shoot at f8. Okay, f-stop f8. That means I want to be able to have a little bit of depth of field in my image. So I would make sure that that light is bright enough to do that. And so I would set those two, would be my first place to start my exposure. Okay, front light or fill light. Fill light is what's going to fill in the shadows. As painters, you may not want to use too much fill light because you're wanting that deep shadow look. But you might, if you're painting kids, you might want it to be a little lighter in the feel of it. Then that's when we would probably pull a fill light in. So a fill light usually is either from, if this is my main light, the fill light is usually on the other side of the camera, either close to the camera or more to the side of the camera. Okay. And then there's what's called an edge or kicker light. In some of those black and white images that I showed, you see a highlight that frames the side of their faces. That's an edge or kicker light from the back or closer to the side. Okay. That actually helps shape the face as well. Oh, I went too far back. The background light, sorry, head of it. The background light lights the background. Really that simple. It helps to separate the subject from the background. Okay. And you may want it dark, you may want it light, you may want it to be a little small circle, you may want it to be a like window light coming from the blinds. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do in the background. Okay. First set up the main light, then the fill light. The main light is always what you start with. Fill light comes in second. And at the end, the background light. You don't ever set the background light up first and do it. You always want to start with your main light, because the main light may be hitting the background some. Remember how I was talking about if I'm really close to the background, it's going to light the background. If I'm really far away from the background, it's going to fall off drastically. So it'll be darker. Okay. It's done that way because if we would turn on all the lights at the same time, we would not be able to recognize which light is dropping, which shadow. I always like to do one light at a time, because then I know exactly what each light's doing, okay? Sometimes I use a reflector as my fill, so it's not really another light, it's just a modifier that's taking this light and bouncing light back in. But sometimes I want to use a real, another light so that I have more control over it. Because this I have to move in and out, where a light, I could turn the power up or down, okay? The main light source is light with the highest light output. It can be the sun at high output, a high output flash, a large tungsten light, or a fluorescent overhead light. Regardless of the light color temperature, the main light is the light source with the highest intensity light output. I know that sounds like that's common sense, but I can't tell you how many times people don't do that. The fill light is the light that casts from the second light source that fills in the shadows or the lightness or lightens the shadows and reduces the scene's contrast. So when we fill in shadows, that makes our contrast not so contrasty, okay? That means that we're bringing all the tones closer together than further apart, okay? All right, here we go. Okay, lighting ratios. This is probably more technical than y'all probably want, but if our main light and our fill light is exactly the same exposure, that means we have flat light. That means we have really no shadows, okay? If we have a 2-to-1 ratio, there's a one-stop difference between the main light and the fill light, which means the main light is one stop brighter than the fill light. So in terms of, I'm going to stay with f-stops instead of making all the exposure crazy. So if this is at f8, my fill light would be at 5.6 power-wise. Okay, does that make sense? Am I making sense? Because I know I'm kind of talking photo terms. Okay. And that's like what all general photography is at. 2-to-1 is like, that is like the majority of the photography you see in magazines and on the web and all that stuff. So 4-to-1 is 2 stops difference between the main and the fill. That's a very dramatic light, something that you guys might be interested in, because that's something that Margaret was telling me to make sure I mentioned was shadows. So this would be what we call a low-key light. So like a low-key scene where everything's kind of darker, okay, except the subject may be a little bit lighter. Very fine art, black and white photography is usually a 4-to-1 ratio, okay? Now, I know I'm talking about artificial light, but the sunlight works the same way, right? You got shade, which is flat. You got in between the shade, that little area in between the shade and the bright sun, where it's kind of dappled. So it's a little softer, a little harder. Then in bright sunlight, we've got really hard shadows and icky and gross, especially if we shoot at noon, right? The shadows are coming straight down like a horror picture or like a horror picture from up underneath. Same direction, just opposite. Okay. So you can still apply all this stuff to sunlight as well. So let's say you guys don't want to do 5D lights. You can use window light, okay, but you limit yourself with time of day. So you have to shoot at certain times of the day to achieve those results. So the lower the light is during the day, the harder the light is. As it rises up, it's going to soften because it's not directly coming into the window, right? Everybody kind of knows that at sunset. See all those beautiful light beams coming in. So keep that in mind as well. You can still take reference pictures with beautiful window light. You just have to, you're limited to the times of days that you can do it, and depending on what style. Okay. And you still might want a fill card. It could be a white poster board. It doesn't have to be one of these fancy flip things, or it could be a piece of foam board. You know, I would say get foam board because it's hard and sturdy, where poster boards like all flexible and want to like stand up for you. And you just modify it that way. So light can be modified no matter whether it's the sun or if it's artificial light, okay? If it's a cloudy, overcast day, what kind of light is that? Diffused and soft, right? And it can be really pretty, right? I like it too. It makes it look, doesn't show up all my dark circles and stuff. So, you know, if you've got something in mind, you know it's going to be an overcast day, and that's the type of light you're looking for, plan it around the weather, and then pop someone outside and snap away. Okay. All right. Two types of lights that we use. One is constant light or continuous light, or some people call it ambient light. Okay, it's a light that can be turned on or off. It's one or the other. Okay, it doesn't have this flash of power. Okay, these are continuous lights. An LED is a continuous light. The tungsten lights are continuous lights. Okay, when you're shooting people, once again, you have to be worried at what shutter speed you're shooting them at, because if they're not a high enough shutter speed, you're going to get a little bit of movement. You know, you might not get it at a 30th of a second if you're really good, but anything underneath that, you're probably going to see a little black line around their head, or it's going to be a little white blur from their hair or whatever. And their eyes will probably not be sharp. Okay. When I teach at the Art Institute, and when I teach beginning photographers, that is one of the biggest mistakes that they mostly make, is not shooting at a high enough shutter speed when they're shooting without flash. Okay. Okay, flash or strobe. And this is kind of a technical definition, but the strobes store the power in a capacitor and release it all at one time, creating a fast, high-powered burst of light to illuminate a scene or subject. Flash is always controlled by the f-stop or the aperture. Okay. Where with ambient, we're more concerned about the shutter speed. With flash, we're worried about the f-stop. And the reason being is most cameras have a flash sync issue. So if there's anything over 200 of a second and you're using a flash, you'll get a black line in your image. And that's just because the shutter's not being able to move fast enough as the flash is going on. Okay. I'm sure if you've got a camera, you've had that happen at some point or another, right? And you're going, what did I do wrong? My camera's broken, the shutter's not working, but that's what it is. So when you're using flash, you're worried about this, the f-stop, leaving it the same, okay, or not the same. You use it to change the exposure. You leave the shutter speed under 1/200 of a second. Okay. If you have a Nikon, I think it's 2/50th, but Sony and Canons are 200. Okay. What brand does everybody have? Canon. Nikon. Okay.
We should have brought our cameras today.
Yeah, we could have looked at that. So Nikon's the only man out that does a little higher, because it was really geared towards photojournalism for a while, their brand. And so that was really important to a photojournalist to have higher flashing. We used to shoot with medium format cameras, which were, if anyone knows what a Hasselblad is, or a Mamiya, shaking head back there. That had a different type of shutter in it. Our DSLRs have a focal plane shutter, which means the shutter moves either this way or this way when it opens. Bet you didn't know that. Okay. So it can't move out of the way fast enough above 200 or 250. Okay. In medium formats, and you remember Hasselblads, right, Margaret? Miss those, I miss shooting in my Hasselblad really bad. You can shoot at any shutter speed and it doesn't matter because the way the lens opens up is like a leaf. Okay, it opens up like this. And it's called a leaf shutter. So back in the film days, we were able to shoot at whatever shutter speed we wanted as long as we had a medium format camera. Okay. So lighting patterns. This is your typical Rembrandt light. Okay. You've got the triangle right there. It means that no shadow has to touch that shadow for it to be a Rembrandt. This was actually a little harder light, and you can tell that there's a little bit of fill in the shadow, but not a lot. Can y'all tell that? It's actually kind of on my screen, I can see it, but up there it's kind of more contrasting. Yeah. So there was a fill card in this one. Yeah, you can see it better now. So see, now we have actual tone in here instead of it just being a big old flat line. That is usually achieved by that 45-degree angle for your main light. Okay. Hard light, if you're using a hard light, it's going to show up better because the shadow is more distinct. But if you're using a softbox or an umbrella, you will still see that triangle, it'll just be filled in a little bit more. The loop light, similar to the Rembrandt, but this no shadow doesn't touch the side cheek shadow. See how it just makes that little loop right there? That's a loop light. And that light just moves around towards camera just a little bit more. Okay. Now, depending on the height of the light, depends on where the loop falls on the face. Because the loop might come all the way down here, or if you've got it at a certain height, it'll be tighter, like closer to the nose, like hers is. By the way, these are students. Good. And this is butterfly or Paramount light. Paramount Studios is where this light was kind of established back in the day. It creates a butterfly underneath the nose. See that? That makes it a butterfly light. Remember how I was talking about edge light or kicker light earlier? There's an edge light from here and an edge light from here. And see how it shapes the face? Now that might not be something you want. That might be a little more commercial.
Where would the lights have been?
The side, the edge lights.
Well, no, I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't tell you where they were, did I?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. It's right almost above the camera. It's right. It's usually about right in here. The higher it goes, the longer the shadow is it goes on down to the lip. You really don't want it to go down into the lip because then you get this weird shape out of it.
And what about the two side lights?
The two side lights are a little bit from behind.
Okay, so the side light on the right is catching his hair. The
Uh-huh.
side light on the left is not.
It's not because it's a little further back.
Oh.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like, because it's defining exactly the same parts of the face. So would they have maybe put something to obstruct the light?
One actually has a grid, a fabric grid on it, and the other one didn't.
Okay.
I was really demonstrating that for the class. But good eye, you caught that.
You know, lots of times you would want maybe to accentuate certain parts of the hair or not accentuate. And I wonder, so how did you do that again?
There, and I'll show you in a minute. It's a grid that goes into the softbox that narrows the beam of the light. And this light's actually a little bit lower than this light on this side. That's why it's not hitting the hair as much. Sometimes I don't like everything to be symmetrical.
And so how did you shot this, right?
Yes.
So how did you achieve such dark shadows on the neck, but not really on the shirt, the white shirt.
It's because the light's above the camera. And it's casting the shadows down. Yeah, and believe it or not, everybody's face is different. And some people's jaws stick out further than others, and you know, we could go into all kinds of different anatomy things that go on. But it depends, that makes a difference as far down as it goes as well. And noses. The Rembrandt light, if someone's got a big nose, it might not have to be so far over to 45 degrees to get that triangle, because the nose is bigger. If it's a real flat or small nose, then you may have to move it a little bit more to the side to get that look. So everybody's different. Every subject is different. You just have to know the basics so that you can adjust it. I didn't mention hair light earlier, and I probably should do that while I got it on my mind. A hair light is essentially a light that just lights the hair. So, and it usually is from either the side or the back, from behind, just hitting the hair. Okay, then there's another set of lighting patterns, and it depends on how the face is lit. Okay, so this is broad light, which means the largest size of the face is lit, with the other side in shadow. Okay, this has a fill card, and you can see how there's a fill card there, right? See how that's just a little bit of gradation there? Just to fill it in just enough to have some texture there. So that's broad light. And this is short light, which means the side closest to the camera is mostly in shadow, and the shorter side of the face has light on. Okay, that can be very dramatic as well. Broad light can be dramatic depending on how you light it. All right, that's
might be worth mentioning face shapes and weights for broad and short as well.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You wouldn't necessarily light a very heavy person broadly.
Oh no, you would totally not light someone that was overweight or had round facial features with broad light. Okay, you'd want to use a shorter light to make them a little more slim. We want everybody to look nice, right? Now sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to paint it realistically, right? Or shoot it realistically. Yeah. And if someone's got a really, yes, let me finish this real statement and I get to. If someone's really super thin, you know, and it's got like real chiseled features, you would want to put a broad light on them just to fill them out a little bit. Like if it was just over the top, too thin. Yes, ma'am.
So most of the things you've talked about have been under controlled studio situations, not everything. And when you showed us a lot of your work, you shot outside. And so a lot of people that are painting children or, you know, whatever the situation, animals, they have to shoot outside.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about how to achieve some of the effects that you've talked about when you
Absolutely.
can't move the sun?
Yeah, because we kind of can't move God's light, can we?
I mean, you can choose like to shoot on a cloudy day, you can choose to
Right.
shoot in the shade, but if you can't choose those things and you're shooting like a person with a horse or something and they're out in the paddock, and how do you work with those situations?
So let's say you're shooting the person with the horse out in the paddock. Okay. One thing, horses don't like strobes too much. Not all horses, but quite a few don't. So you have to worry about that a little bit. So if we weren't using lights, because a lot of my stuff, even though it might not look like it, it had a strobe in it. Okay, to create it. So in that case, I would probably go to something to where I could diffuse the light a little bit if I could. If I couldn't get them in the light the way I like them, and I thought it was just too contrasty. But that's something that y'all might not do because you really need something a lot bigger than this. Like I have what's called a silk, it has a 12-foot by 12-foot frame with the fusion on it. That's what I would use. But for you guys, that's kind of a little more complicated. So you will have to like look for the light, like in the paddock, you know, in the time of day. So if you can kind of get some of the shadow in the back, or to where, you know, you can maybe bounce some light with a big reflector, like a big reflector card back into it, or a silver card. A silver card is going to be a little bit more sharper in the quality of the light. You may, you know, let's say you're in the paddock and it's overcast and it's just so flat, and you're like, oh, I wish they had a little punch into it. Then, you know, you might want to get the silver card and try to find something that you could, you know, pop it in. Or what you might want to do would be,
You obviously need an assistant.
oh yeah, use a black card. Because what would happen is, like, if I came up to Joe and put that there, I know y'all can't see it, but it puts shadow there, right? So we do a lot of subtractive, it's called subtractive lighting, when we don't have control over stuff. So a big old black piece of fabric or an umbrella, one of those big golf umbrellas, totally would work. Absolutely. But I would say big. Everything's got to be a little bit bigger when you got a horse. So if it's just a person, yeah, no, I mean, I was just, because for me, that makes it a little more difficult.
It does.
Right?
A lot of children want to be painted with a horse.
Yeah.
One of the advantages that painters have, though, is you don't have to get the light right on the whole scene.
No.
Right.
You just get it right on
Absolutely.
on the face and enough of their clothing, and then you paint it right.
Right.
And you know, the background can be, you know, whatever you want it to be. And you know, maybe a separate photo.
And that's another, that's a good way of thinking about it. I even shoot photos that way. I'll shoot the background separately and then shoot the light like I want it on the subject.
Well, and you said that you photoshopped 12 views with the cat.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, I think a lot of artists use Photoshop to create.
And I was gonna ask if you guys use Photoshop. Does everybody kind of mess up around with it? No? You should try it. It might change the way you see things a little bit. With Photoshop, I'm usually under a deadline when I'm shooting stuff because I'm doing from one shot to another, or I'm on location with some kind of crazy something going on. I always shoot a background with no one in it. So if something goes awry, I can easily strip whatever I need into it. You know, I would recommend that, you know, if that's something y'all are interested in. But I can't tell you how many times I've changed heads out on people. Because someone's blamed, you know, if you got a group. Kids are never doing what the parents are doing, right? So there's lots of taking out heads and putting them in from another image.
Well, it's another question that I thought of at the very beginning, but when you have to shoot, and portrait painters don't have to do this quite as much as photographers, but when you have to shoot like a boardroom,
Yeah.
where you have a whole group of people, or maybe a church or school, or whatever it may be, a group, how do you think about dealing with the lighting when you've got multiple faces, some are close to the light, some are further away?
Well, I usually light it a little flat, you know, or soft. I shouldn't say flat because it still has contrast and it still has shadows. But I usually light it where it's softer light, so that everything, you know, I don't have a lot of shadows caused from one person to the next, right? And I hate boardroom shots because they're going straight back on top of it, which makes it a focusing nightmare and everything. I did have a shoot, it's been a while ago, at the Ritz-Carlton, the Watergate Hotel, where there was all these important automotive paint people. And the art director, I love art directors, Margaret, but this one like almost drove me crazy. Wanted to light each person with their own light. And there was 15 people. So I had to have 15 lights.
That's an interesting concept.
I can't find that image. I was looking for it the other day because I thought, oh, that might be a good one to talk about. So, and it was, you know, it was in Washington DC, so I had to either rent everything and travel with it, or take what I have and rent up there. And that's, they didn't have what I needed. DC's not a big photo town, so I had to rent everything here, so it made everything expensive. You know, y'all know how much it is to travel with suitcases and stuff. Well, try traveling with 75 to 100-pound bags.
Did the people look better with their own lights, do you think?
It's just a style.
They look different.
They look different. It was just something different. That's what advertising's about, coming up with the new, coolest, latest, greatest thing. So, I did like the shot because it made it kind of cinematic in a way. Kind of felt like a Godfather type scenario. I just wished I could put my hands on that. I actually shot that with film, so I can't find the negatives. I'm in the slides. But that was one of the more difficult lighting scenarios I've ever had, because it was so many lights. And I had to hire an assistant up there that a college buddy of mine recommended him. And I thought, okay, this guy would be good, because I like to travel with people I know. I do not like hiring people on location, because I always get a mixed bag. This guy walks in, has an attitude. He didn't want to help set up all the lights, and I got 15 lights to set up with a certain amount of period of time. And he goes back, sits on the chair with his newspaper, and our director's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. And I said, dude, you gotta get back up here and help me. He goes, I don't know why they didn't hire me. Why did they hire a girl? And I was just like, here we go. I said, dude, you can either come over here and start helping me, or you're not gonna get paid for the day and you can leave. I'm done. So you just never know.
What do you do?
He ended up doing it, but he was grumbling and griping the whole time. So don't do that, you two. I got 2 students here. Yeah.
Just a quick technical question.
Mhm.
You know, if you were shooting on like outside and you wanted to use a light to assist in some way,
Mhm.
are there ways to do that without electricity?
Yes, actually, my strobes are battery powered. I couldn't wait till that happened because I hate cords. You also can use speed lights, which Nikon calls them something else. I can't remember what Nikon calls them. But they're on-camera flashes, so it would actually fit into the hot shoe on top of the camera. But you can also, this is a trigger that fires my flashes remotely, and it works for this, so I can actually put it on a stand. This is lightweight, right, compared to any, the big stuff. But it's really hard to overpower the sun with these, because there's just not a lot of power. But if you're in shade, it's perfect. It'll work great. And there's a thing called high-speed sync that you can set these to, which allows you to shoot over the 1/200th of a second. But what it does is it pulses the light as the shutter is moving down, so you lose power. So when you have high-speed sync, you really have to be in the shade, or at least backlit so the person's not lit by
So
the
is
sun.
there a way to make it be on all the time so you can see?
Oh yeah, you can leave it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I leave it on all the time. If you do event photography, the TTL, which means through the lens, metering, and it sets it automatically for you. For painters, it'd be perfectly fine for you guys to do that. I wouldn't say y'all have to be in manual.
So is that a flash or a strobe?
It's the same thing,
Oh, okay.
same thing. Strobe and a flash thing.
Oh, but I thought the flash was, never mind.
Yeah, it's just that, it means it comes out fast.
Okay.
It's strobing out or it's flashing out.
Okay.
It's really something. Yes, ma'am.
I know this isn't a professional photography thing probably, but what do you think about those ring lights that they sell for like Zoom and that?
You can
I bought
use,
one and I thought, oh, this will be good. Maybe I can use it for lighting for like doing a portrait or, you know, maybe child or whatever, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what it does.
The question, to a certain degree, might be, what do you want it to look like?
that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
I just don't see how it's any different than turning on the lamp.
It is different because it casts shadows in a different way.
So
And it
the
makes
shadow,
circles for
And it
how-
makes circles in their eyes. So they actually look like the cat of stone when you shoot, right?
So I would propose that you could, and I've never played with a ring light because I don't like the way it looks in the eyes, but I bet you could take a black cardboard, cover up part of it and just use the top part of it.
Oh, yeah, you absolutely, you
Manipulate
absolutely
it.
can.
We actually did that in Kelly's class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can totally
Well,
do
maybe
that.
you did. I wouldn't have.
Some ring lights come with a cover that is 2 pieces, so you can actually use it. But they're not very, you have to be in, you couldn't put that out in the sun and use
it's
it.
not very powerful.
No, there's not a lot of power to those. But for Zooms, they're perfect. So, because it's really close to you, right? Remember we were talking about the light basics? So it's really close to you and it makes it soft because it's close to us
It's flat.
and it's flat. Beauty. It's doing
Well,
that beauty
it's
thing.
flat if you're looking through the ring.
Yeah, if you're looking off, it's not.
You don't have to look through the ring.
Yeah. You can use a ring light from the side, which change the whole quality of it.
I guess I just need to play with it more and see what's playing.
If you're shooting kids, it's not gonna be strong enough to get a high enough shutter speed for, and kids are, unless you got the perfect child that doesn't move,
Not strong enough. So you don't have enough light.
you don't have enough power coming out of it to light.
It's an LED that you have, like
Yeah,
the Zoom.
yeah.
Just-
I was assuming it was LED,
Yeah,
but they do
right.
make they still make the fluorescent ones, I think, too.
uh,
Where it's a tube.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is a step up from this one. This is actually a Godox version of it, but Flashpoint also makes it. And this is like 150 watt seconds, and I know I'm really getting into technical stuff. But what that means is how much light's coming out of it. Okay. So this is about 150 to 125-ish. This is 200 to 250, so it's almost a whole stop more power, but in not much bigger scenario. And you can add cool attachments like this that have diffusion on the front and grid spots, which narrows the beam of light.
So does that mean that with the larger one, you could be further, you have further away?
I could have it further away.
Person.
And I could put it in a softbox and it would be fine. This one, it'd have to be a smaller softbox with probably silver on the inside of it.
So,
It would really
for
work
the
well.
power that's coming out of that, the
Mhm.
150, how close does that need to be to your subject?
Pretty close,
What does that mean?
within, 2 feet, 2-3 feet. Yeah.
So your camera has to be either as or on a stand.
Oh, no, you can have a tripod all the way back. You just gotta make sure it's, off to the side enough that with a 300 millimeter, you should be able to totally hide that. Absolutely. But it needs to be a tighter shot. And umbrellas, you can use these with umbrellas, which makes it a little bit bigger light. It's just the power, you have to shoot like a higher ISO to get the power you need out of it. Like, you really need to be at least at 400, maybe 800. Okay. Now, my camera would handle 800 no problem, but yours might not. If you have a Rebel, I don't know which one you have, but it might not, you might start getting grain at 800. So there's so many cameras out there, so many different things. Hmm?
Some artists just paid for one.
I know, and there is something to be said for that. But, it's great to go on and have it. you know, Norman Rockwell, that's how he worked. And, you know, he was considered a sellout for a long time because he did that. He used to have prints made and cut everything out and put them together. Early Photoshop, back when we didn't have Photoshop.
Yeah.
So, and I found that amazing that he did that. He was very, you know, forward thinking for his time, actually. Even though people thought, oh, he's commercial, he's not an artist. So, and then he became Americana, right? Okay. I'm just gonna quickly talk about a little bit about equipment. I don't want to harp on it because there's so much stuff out there that we could spend, you know, a whole evening discussing equipment. But the flashes that I use are Flashpoint. They're not the most expensive, they're not the cheapest. They're workhorses, and if I dropped one, I wouldn't, you know, feel like I had to go rob a bank to buy another one. But they're about $800 a piece, which, you know, for the average person that's not doing what I do, would be a little too much money for them. But it does a lot of great things. So, and I can put a lot of attachments on it. The next thing is like LEDs, right? That's the new thing, and a lot of LEDs are getting brighter and brighter so that you can do more things with it. You can actually put it through that diffusion and you still get enough output from it. This light is about $120, and it's an LED from Amazon. And it uses the Bowen light modifiers, which are, there's tons of them out there and they're not expensive. And it just so happens my expensive ones use those same modifiers, so that's why I actually bought this. And it's adjustable. It can go, you know, it can come on and off, you know, the lighter and brighter.
So how long can you leave that on?
Indefinitely. I mean,
Doesn't get too hot.
doesn't get too hot. Now this is a super LED, so you can feel a little heat from it. Sorry, I'm trying to block it. Hey. For the money, for $125, you know, it's not a bad. I use this for video song because it is a good fill light. What is it again? It's GBM. I think it's good, great video maker on Amazon. They actually have one that's even got more power than this one now for $150. No, this one's only daylight. That one's only daylight. Any of their LEDs that you can change the color temperature, you're going to go up significantly in price by several $100s easily. You can put filters over it, absolutely. And it doesn't have one on here, but you can get a reflector that allows you to put grid spots in it, which narrows that beam of light. I forgot to put split light in my PowerPoint, but split light is essentially directly from the side where one side of the face is lit and the other side's not. Okay, sorry, I was like, I'm forgetting something. What am I forgetting there? And on the way over here, I was talking to Joe and I was like, dadgummit, I forgot split light.
So I have a question about your lights thing.
Mhm.
It's a great stand for showing us 4 lights, but.
Oh, you don't need this.
When you're shooting normally, do you have multiple lights?
Absolutely.
You do.
Absolutely. Now, I do light with one light every once in a while. Depends on the type of look I'm looking for. One light can be very painterly feeling, in fact. If I'm doing headshots for corporate folks, I usually have 2 lights. I have one kind of lighting the background and a little bit from behind, and then one lighting them.
But you have them both on that same stand?
No, just the regular, like the stand, it's holding them.
Oh.
I brought this because I can move it around easy, and I use this more for video type stuff than I do for the still stuff. And this bracket allows me to, if I'm shooting stills and video, that I can put a constant light on here and a strobe, and it go through the same modifier, so I'm only having to turn them on and off. This was one of the best purchases I made last year. Because it came in handy. Okay, so y'all want to talk about modifiers for a minute? It's an African drum. No. This is an octabox. So it's essentially a big softbox. It's round. Okay. I love octaboxes because I like that it puts a round catch light in people's eyes. And that makes it look a little more like the sun. Where the other, I didn't bring a regular softbox. Should have. This is what's called a strip box. But soft boxes are usually rectangular and look like windows. So it just depends on what. I like the way this wraps around people's faces. Where this I can really modify it not to do that. So it really depends on what I'm shooting. A strip box is essentially a skinny softbox. And remember I was talking about grid spots a while ago. This is the grid spot. This is a fabric grid spot. So by putting this on, it narrows the beam of light. So it's not hitting everywhere. Okay. A lot of softboxes now come with these. It used to be a real rare thing. I even have one that goes into this one. I just didn't bring it with me. These are a little more expensive because they're meant more for pro photographers, but they're not unattainable. These aren't like Shimira's, which was like a big brand for a long time. So this would probably be like $50 now. And it has that same mounting. If you have a light that has that same mounting, you can interchange it. This one is more in the 250, 300 range because it's bigger.
Can you put that big one on one of those lights?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. You just put a little sandbag, make sure it's got a sandbag or something that's heavy so it doesn't fall over.
And then you have a smaller one.
Yes, ma'am.
When would you make the decision to use the bigger one or the smaller one?
The bigger one's going to have more wrap around the face and it's going to light more of the area. A smaller box is going to be more direct, even though it's soft, but because it's smaller, it's going to make it harder, right? Remember we were talking about the size? Just because it's soft box doesn't mean it can't have a hard quality to it because of the size of it and how far away it is from the subject. This little light goes on these guys. So it just pops in. I love this silly little light. This is like $20, or it might be more now. Pop it on there. I can have my assistant hand hold it wherever I want it. And because it's smaller, it's going to narrow that beam of light. So it's not lighting everything around them, but on them.
Can you demonstrate that one when you get around?
I
to
will.
doing that?
I'll be glad to. And then there's soft boxes, umbrellas. And these are probably the cheapest modifiers that you guys could buy. Because you can get an umbrella for $30. This one is, this brand's Adorama in New York sells it. And it's a really good brand for the price. And I think this one was about $50. And then this was like an extra 30 to go on the front of it. An umbrella has a, let me just take this off. You gotta see. Okay, see that it has silver in it? That means it's gonna bounce that light back a little stronger. So if I was using one of those smaller flashes, that would make them have a little more punch, more power coming out because it's utilizing the flash better. If this was white, it wouldn't have as much power coming back. So an umbrella kind of lights everything. It doesn't narrow the beam. It's just lighting everything. But it can be very pretty because we can move it in and make it tighter and not spread everywhere. Okay, if I was lighting this room, I'd probably have a bunch of umbrellas up trying to light the room. Okay. When I put this diffusion on it, it makes it really soft and it makes it more like a softbox. So instead of traveling with that big honking thing right there, this comes down. And I'm not traveling with something so large, right? And that folds up and fits in the bag. So this for me, for you guys could be really something that's, and you can buy them. I've got a 65-inch over there that's bigger than that. And then
that one.
this is 41. And they also make them itty bitty like that other one. So if it's an itty bitty light, that even makes it smaller and more narrow, right? And those are even cheaper because there's little. And those will fit in a little small bag, super easy. So if you're like shooting kids in the shade, pop one of those on. Now the wind doesn't like these. Okay, just like regular umbrellas. I consider these as expendables because they will guarantee if I'm outside, one's gonna go.
So not for beach shop,
Huh?
not for a beach.
No. I would totally say get a softbox for that one. Let me show you something because I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm trying to figure out what y'all know and you don't know. So by your questions, I'm trying to adjust things. Yeah, where's my button? So if I have it in really close here, see how the light's only in that small circle, which means it's a smaller light. Okay. If I move it out and it fills all that area, that makes it a bigger light. So just by how I move it in and out means how I can adjust whether it's a smaller light or a bigger light. And if I really want it to be smaller, whoop, that's not supposed to happen. I just collapse it and make it smaller.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Okay. And if you want it to have more like a strip box, a really skinny thing, you can just put a card over that side and do that. So this is a really versatile light modifier. I didn't bring a beauty dish with me, but a beauty dish is like a big reflector that has white and it has a little hard quality, but it's usually used for beauty light. And it's placed usually, it's not always placed right over the camera. It can be on anywhere you want it, but that's how a lot of people.
Looks like, almost like it's shot outside.
Yeah, it can. All right.
Is there anything else we need to? Oh, I want to see the skinny one with the grid.
The scheme. Oh, we're gonna do the grid. Hold on. I forgot.
I've been waiting for that skinny one.